People say SQL, or SQL Server, or they say SQL Server Management Studio, and you're confused. What are they trying to say? In this video, I'm going to be telling you much about the difference, and so you can understand better and be like a pro. Welcome to my cyberspace. Let's get right into it. A lot of times when you apply for jobs or just people start mentioning SQL, people give a different name, and initially for myself it was confusing. I had to do my research about it before I had a perfect understanding of the different names when it comes to SQL or SQL. Let's start from the basics. What is SQL? SQL is a acronym for the word structured query language. And whenever you hear the word SQL, one of the things that you will hear often is people mentioning database. So structured query language, SQL, it's also like a programming language, like you have Python, R. It's a language that mostly data scientists, data analysts, or data engineer use. And database, you think of it as a library where you store data. So when you go to a library and you see that you have different section, they store like history books or finance book or whatever kind of genre or whatever the kind of book, they have it in different section. Imagine you have your data as a piece of paper. The whole idea of a database is that we have somewhere where we store our data so it is properly organized. So structured query language, where people call SQL or SQL, is like the language. However, there are different database management systems. So there are different database management systems, just the same way you might have like libraries of different branch, but most of the time the idea of a library is always the same, whereby you have a librarian, you have like a shelf, or you have like different sections and all of that. So there are different like database management software or tools that are out there, and you might be getting to hear their name. So one of which is SQLite. It's spelled SQLite, right? So SQLite. So basically it's a very like small like database where you can store tables. It's perfect for learning or and also like trying to power like smaller apps. Another one is also MySQL. You might say MySQL, so you might like be wondering what's SQL. So it's more like somebody creates like a brand or say a drink, right? Or and there's like Pepsi, there's Diet Coke. So that's the kind of like what you think about SQL, and you think of SQLite, or you think of MySQL. So there's SQL, which is a language in itself that you speak in. It's just the same way we speak English in the United States and different part of the world, or you might have like different variants, whereby in the UK it's a little bit different from like American standard. So I'm just trying to give all these illustrations so you can have a better understanding. The major thing you need to understand is SQL in itself, and you can write SQL in all these different flavors or all these different database management. So I've mentioned SQLite, I'd mentioned MySQL. There's also PostgreSQL. So it's all of these ones are also open source. I mean, they're available for you. And there's SQL Server and there's Oracle database. It depends. So you might have a question, okay, so which one should I go for? It depends on your device, it depends on your goal. Based off of popularity, SQL Server is mostly like one of the top SQL like version that people have been using. When you go from to most organizations, they mostly would use SQL Server. And the major issue with SQL Server is the fact that it's only compatible on x64 Windows laptop. So if you have like a ARM64 Windows, or you are using a Mac, you can't run it directly. You can't run SQL Server directly on that. So you might want to try other flavor of SQL, like either like SQLite or PostgreSQL or Oracle database. I think that's the major hindrance when it comes to using SQL Server. But when it comes to like widely acceptability, like SQL Server is still one of the best. They have a whole lot of other features that allows you to learn SQL better. In this video, I'm going to be explaining more on how to use SQL Server, and other videos I might talk about how to use SQLite or how to use PostgreSQL, and that's because the majority of the company are using SQL Server. If your device is compatible with Windows x64, you could just check up your device type, which is if it's x64, I recommend you start with SQL Server because that's what a lot of persons are using. Then you might hear the word SQL Server Management Studio. So think of SQL Server as like the language, and think of SQL as a language and SQL Server as the engine. Why? What is the front end? The SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio is just like a fancy ID for you to be able to like run your SQL. So when you install SQL Server, you still need to install SQL Server Management Studio, because although you can still work with SQL on your laptop if you don't have SQL Server Management Studio, but it's just best to install SQL Server Management Studio. So the route is basically, all you need to do is just install SQL Server. So when you install SQL Server, it allows you to run SQL. Then you need to install SQL Server Management Studio. You can install SQL Server Management Studio alone, but if you don't install SQL, it's not going to work. So I think that's something you need to be aware of. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about why you should not learn SQL. And in case this video was a value for time, do well to subscribe, like, and follow. Thank you.